Hi Taivi, welcome today. I'm looking forward to speaking with you about how different markets can impact clients at various stages of their retirement plan. So when markets get turbulent, what are the kind of reactions that you get from new or more inexperienced clients?
I think when you're dealing with somebody who's young or just has never really done this before, we as advisors really need to take into consideration all the other external stressors that are already impacting their lives. So if you're dealing with somebody who is young, maybe in their 30s or their early 40s, they're probably dealing with very large debt loads if they've gotten themselves into the housing market and they have large mortgages, or maybe they just simply have really expensive daycare. So we need to be aware of the things that are happening to these people, depending on where they are in space and time in their own personal lives. If we're dealing with midlifers, those that are maybe more in their 40s and 50s, they've got different things that are talking to them as well. So when we're dealing again with the markets, this is just another layer of stress on their regular life, right? So they're dealing with maybe aging parents, or maybe they're sending their children off to school. So when we're talking about their money and their finances, it's integrated into all of their lives. It's not just this thing that they have to deal with out in space and time down the road in the future when they get into retirement.
And what about for those younger people, maybe under 50, not quite at the thinking about retirement stage?
If we're talking to younger people who maybe have not experienced 2008, they've probably been attracted to high torque, high velocity, big risk type of products. They're in for a surprise because when the volatility hits, they've maybe never experienced it before, so they are definitely going to be in for a bit of a shock, let's say. Their lived experience hasn't been there yet for them to be able to deal with these types of things.
And of course now that begs the question, how about those older clients who maybe have had a bit more experience?
When it comes to older clients, maybe those that were invested in sort of the last 10 or 15 years, and they've seen a lot of these ups and downs. They're older, but they also have that experience. Potentially, their natural inclination to panic, I would hope, might actually be a lot less because they already know what to expect. They understand the rebound effect that when the markets fall, they do come back. And it's not a, sky is falling, Chicken Little moment.
So how do you deal with those clients who are experiencing anxiety during turbulent markets?
I tend to be very proactive, so I try to set the stage right from the very beginning of the relationship and then keep that as a maintenance program. So ongoing client communication, we're sending out updates, we're sending out information to them on a regular basis, but I'm also meeting with them. And I try to be very, very proactive in how I manage those relationships with clients. When I'm meeting with somebody new or even with just clients in general, I have this sort of funny way of approaching things, but I give people one guarantee. And the only guarantee that I will actually ever give them is that at some point in time, I am going to lose you money. And we all know that this is going to happen. It's not a secret, so I think it's one of those things that we definitely need to tell the client. People really respect that information when you give it to them. It is a guarantee that something's going to happen out of our control, our mutual control, and they are preemptively aware of this. They know it's going to happen. And it really builds a little bit more of trust into the relationship because I'm not providing these pie-in-the-sky sort of promises towards the client.
So do you have any examples of how a client might have reacted to hearing something like that?
This one gentleman in his 60s was looking for a new financial advisor because the previous relationship had fallen apart. And during all the various interviews, I happened to be one of those people that he was looking at, and I stated that, made that guarantee that at some point in time something is going to happen and we're not going to like it. He decided to work with me because I didn't make those grandiose promise to outperform the market comments at him. I told him how it was going to happen. It was going to be real information. It's not going to be perfect. And I think he really appreciated that because that actually did set me apart from everybody else.
Well, that sounds like a great way to build trust.
I think regular communication is the best way to do that. If you are regularly in contact with your clients, even if it's just a phone call or it's meeting or it's written communication, that is how you build a trust-based relationship with them. I do not believe that clients are ready mentally for incoming roller coasters in the markets. We know it's coming. Volatility is on its way. I believe that if you expect a repeat performance of fantastic markets, as we've had consistently over the last couple of years, I think you're doing yourself a disfavor, let alone your client. We as advisors need to prepare them. We need to get them ready that the roller coasters are coming. The volatility is on its way. We need to encourage them to not be greedy. Greed is the death of a great relationship because the client has not been coached to take a step back, harvest your gains, trim your position, and get ready. I think we need to be in a little position of hunkering down at this point in time.
And what else are you doing to build trust and support those relationships?
Reality is always a bit of a shock for clients if they have not had really good financial literacy or training or education backing them up. And that is also part of that trust-based relationship. It is on us to make sure that we are training them, we are educating, we are using language with clients that is going to make sense of this world that we are in every single day.
Do you ever recommend financial plan or portfolio adjustments during these turbulent times?
Generally, no. I try to set the scene in advance of these things that potentially could deviate us from the path that they happen to be on. So we're not even talking how to invest their assets, at least until meeting 3. So there's a couple of hours of education with the client that are done in advance before we even get to that part. When I first meet with clients, I usually try to gauge how much education they have. And so I'll ask them, well, what do you have? And they'll say to me, I have an RSP. And I go, great. What's in your RSP? And they say, I don't know. I have an RSP. And that's not an answer. We know an account registration is not an investment. If a client cannot distinguish the difference between an account registration and the actual investment itself, I know that I have my work cut out for me.
So how do you start to educate a client like that?
With every new relationship with a client, I tell them, I'm not picking on you, I do this to everybody, and I really do this to everybody. I will ask them, do you know what a stock is? Do you know what a bond is? Can you define diversification? People don't know. The answers that I get are, well, they're not accurate. They're not even probably 20% accurate. A lot of times people are afraid to admit that they have absolutely no idea what we are actually talking about. And I think advisors are kidding themselves if they believe that their wealthiest clients have all this information down pat, because we all know that clients don't always understand.
Absolutely. They're experts in what they do. We're experts in what we do.
Exactly. And there's a bit of shame, I think, for clients and embarrassment. I'm sure you've experienced this yourself. Mm-hmm. They don't want to admit to not knowing. But I think if we approach it in a way that we're sort of making sure that it's a safe space for them, then they're almost relieved to admit that they have no idea.
And how do you talk to clients about their investment options?
I don't tend to use industry language. I find illustrations and stories work really well for people. I talk about boats. Personally, I don't boat. I get nauseous on boats. I don't even know where this came from. But boats work for everybody. So when I'm dealing with somebody who really isn't keeping up with maybe the conversation in technical financial terms, introduce the boats. So if you visualize a boat going at a healthy clip across the water, and it's a beautiful summer day and everybody's happy, and then all of a sudden the skies are darkening and the clouds are rolling in, and before you know it, the waves are crashing over the edge of the boat is getting damaged, you're bailing, things are not going well. This is an equity fund in a volatile market. And I use illustrations like that because they're clean for clients. It is not industry language, it's something that they immediately can visualize in their head. And I tell them eventually that boat's going to pick up steam, it's going to, get going again, but it might take a year for that boat to be functional, and eventually it'll win this imaginary race. To counter that boat, I often talk about tugboats. And tugboats, they're pretty stable, kind of boring, they sort of bob along, and when the volatility hits, the water just kind of sloshes over the side of the boat and there's the tugboat, nothing really happens. That is a bond fund. I also tell clients that there's always the option of being docked at the pier. That's cash. They're in the harbor, nothing much is going to happen while you're there. The final way I explain the investment markets and different options for them is I tell them, okay, now visualize that first boat that you had in your mind, but this time it's dragging its anchor. It's moving hard, but it's intentionally being slowed so that when that volatility does hit, that boat is not going to take on as much damage as the first boat did, but it's moving along at a faster clip than the tugboat is moving. This is a balance fund. And so for a lot of people, somewhere between sort of those extremes of the fast boat, the tugboat, and the boat dragging its anchor, it really works for people. And all these little illustrations create pictures in the minds of the client, and it gets through to them. It always makes me laugh when I will come back on maybe the third meeting and say, okay, this is sort of how we're going to set things up. I want to make sure that you are on side with what we're doing and what's been suggested. Which direction do you want to go? I can't even tell you the amount of times people said, I want the boat pulling the anchor. That is the answer I get all the time because it makes sense to people.
So once someone's become one of your clients, what's the next stage for their education?
I don't believe that you can tell a client something once. We have to have an ongoing process of educating our clients and making sure that their financial literacy levels are coming up on an ongoing basis. So if I'm making a shift in a portfolio or going to move something from A to B, I might circle back to those original conversations that we had had maybe a year ago and said, well, what is diversification? Why are we doing the things that we are doing? And again, it all comes back to making sure that they understand, because when that volatility hits, the basis and all that buildup of all that knowledge is going to serve the client well, and it's going to serve me well, because I'm not going to be dealing with somebody who's a bit into panic mode at this point in time.
So in those potentially panicked times, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, do you wait for the clients to contact you, or do you anticipate and call them?
I'm definitely a scheduler, so I like to have clients on a rotational basis, so we are always bringing them in on a set basis based on their wealth, and they come in and we talk to them and I give them an overview of where we are in the markets and what's happening, and to tell them, like, this has been fantastic in the last couple of years, it's coming, you need to be prepared, the volatility is on its way. We have to get them ready because things don't always go up indefinitely forever and ever and ever.
So if they're on a rotating schedule and something happens between those planned scheduled meetings, what's your action at that point?
So I am trying to make sure that, again, we're back in contact with those clients. So physically I can't see them all in that week when that crisis in the markets happens to hit. However, I have been alluding to something on its way for probably 2 years now, and we've already positioned a lot of the portfolios to be in more defensive mode. They know, the experienced people are ready, I think, in a much more realistic fashion than those who maybe this is their first venture into the investment markets, or for somebody who's brand new. The brand new novice investors, they may not be prepared for what's on its way. So I think the onus is on us.
So you've been in the industry for a while. How have you dealt with market declines in the past?
Our role is to set realistic expectations for our clients. Markets will go down. It's not a secret. Tell your client.
So when you do tell a client and they start to panic a little bit, how do you handle it?
When it comes to a panicking client, we need to confront fear right in the face. If you hide from your client and you avoid returning the phone call or avoid the email response, you've made that emotional response of the client 1,000 times worse. You've set them off on a trajectory that might be really hard to bring them back from. In a trusted relationship between an advisor and a client, the hope is that the panic isn't going to be there because you have put them into suitable investments and you preemptively have talked to them about what potentially can happen when the markets become a little bit more volatile and the media is screaming in the headlines and their best friend is telling them the woe is me story. If you have educated your client, they're going to be able to withstand that a lot better than somebody who hasn't had the benefit of working with you. Fear is an irrational reaction that the client is going to have. And it's just simply because they're scared because they don't understand as much as we understand. We know that when the ball drops, it's going to have a rebound effect and it is going to come back up again. But the client will forget that information and they convince themselves that those numbers that they see on the paper are going to be firm and set in stone. I think since we've had such a great run in 2019, if a financial advisor is tracking managers and they're tracking portfolios and they're watching performance, and if they do think that something is, potentially in the future for 2020, that's not going to look as nice, it would be smart to start trimming those positions now and bring that portfolio back down a step. If you need to move the portfolio around now, then now is the time to do it. What are you possibly waiting for? Harvest your gains, trim that position, maybe bring that first boat back down a bit, maybe make it a more of a balance fund, or maybe trim some of your positions and park some money into cash. These are all the different types of things that somebody could be doing now, and they're preemptively doing this before all the volatility strikes so that it's before the client goes into panic mode.
And how do you relate that back to your boat stories?
So I think our job is to be still waters for the clients, and that's probably the best visualization I would use, because we are supposed to be calm so that they are calm. And if you have to talk life jackets and visualize the, zipping it up for the client, and that you're going to hold their hand through this, and we know that the storm is going to blow over, that is the best thing that we can do. I don't think talking specifically about the portfolio is going to help at that point in time. This is an emotional, fear-driven response that the client is having. And if they made all those investment decisions in a non-emotional state with logic and thought behind it, it shouldn't be deviating. They should still be on that same course. We just, bring out the umbrellas and the rain jackets, and we're good to go for a little bit.
So for clients who are nearing their planned retirement age, what are some of the reactions that you hear from them through times of turbulence?
Well, I think for a lot of those that might have experienced or been invested in the last 10 years ago, I usually get the joking, here we go again, because they've been there. They know what it's like, and they're prepared for it, the experienced investors.
And would they be the first ones you call in this kind of situation?
I believe that age is nothing but a number. And if you're completing your allocations based off of somebody's biological age, I really do believe that you're making a big mistake. Lived experience through market volatility is going to direct a lot of what the client is going to be able to withstand when the next big one hits, or even just when the next little one hits. We need to take that into consideration. Capacity for risk is huge, and I believe it outguns biological age, because you can have somebody who is 25 years old or 35 years old, so their risk tolerance is very, very high, but they don't have the capacity to withstand all the volatility. On the flip side, you can have somebody who's in their retirement years who have huge capacity, but their biological age would dictate that they should be completely out of equities. And I don't really agree with that at all.
So tell me about one of your clients who might have that shorter time horizon but greater capacity for risk.
So I have this one couple. They're in their late 70s, early 80s. They're retired school teachers. They have solid pensions, no children. Everything is going to charity. He just makes me laugh. He gets very offended if you tell him that due to his biological age, he can't go in any particular direction. He said to me once, "I am tired of people treating me like I'm a doddering old fool." And that has stuck with me, because he is absolutely right. And this is where we cycle back around again to risk capacity and age and all that lived experience of what the client can handle. So every situation is going to be unique with the client. Their age is not always going to dictate which path you can go down. It is going to be their age, it's going to be their experiences, it is going to be their wealth, and there's probably even a bunch of other things I haven't even considered.
So how do you deal with those clients who don't have that level of risk capacity and are experiencing a lot of anxiety and saying they just want to get out of the markets?
Those types of situations do scare me a little bit, because that client maybe shouldn't have been in the market, maybe to the degree that they are, if that is actually going to be their reaction. We need to have other tools in the toolbox to be able to provide options to clients, and we need to be setting those tools up right from the get-go. We need to be considering annuities for them. We need to be considering capital protected investments. There needs to be a wide variety of options that the client is going to be introduced to. Our job is to be proactive, not reactive. We know that the clients are going to react, but we need to be there ahead of the game. We need to make sure that we are preempting what the client is going to say. And I think that too many advisors react as opposed to being proactive. It's really just a bad place to be. It's too stressful.
So how do you help your clients understand?
So again, it comes back to financial literacy, but I do believe that stories and illustrations are the best way to describe what's happening in the markets, or just developing that relationship right from the very beginning. We need to stop using so much technical language that's completely meaningless to that person. I watch body language, and there's this weird thing that happens sometimes. They're physically in the room, but the light has left their eyes. And many people will know what I mean by that. You have lost the client in the conversation, even though they're there. To me, they're making grocery lists in their head. They have no idea what I'm talking about. When those situations happen, that's when we need to stop, change the nature of our conversation so that we are back in a safe place that is actually meaningful to the client.
So we've talked a lot about investing and the markets. Our industry has turned to goals-based investing. Tell me how you use this as a concept.
We as an industry work with the intangible. A client leaves our office, it's got some numbers on it, it's air. There's no substance to it. But goals-based investing turns that air into experiences. It turns it into plane tickets and travel experiences and weird food, sabbaticals and business adventures. It turns all this stuff that we are working with into something real. Goals-based investing turns air into something that you can touch and taste and smell and feel. It becomes real to the client. And when we're dealing with volatility, there is a tendency for that fear to overdrive those emotions again for that client, and they're going to start to derail. Our job is to bring them back, refocus them on those goals. Remember, client, when you wanted to fill in the blank? That is our job, to refocus them and bring them back down to that place that they are working towards, and just to sort of, maybe shut their eyes a little bit to some of the media headlines as they are right now.
So new advisors are often asking me what kind of questions I'm asking to get that difficult to find information out of clients. What kind of questions are you asking?
Well, I don't really beat around the bush. I'm pretty blunt with clients, and it's almost a sense of relief for them as well. I will ask them, do you need money? Do we have any debts we need to take care of? When I ask it, there's definitely a sense of relief for them, because they didn't have to say, oh, by the way, I need $5,000. It's just out there on the table. It's a piece of business. It gets done and dealt with and put to bed, and we move on.
Removing shame from the conversation entirely.
Exactly. I remind clients, this is your money. You can do with it what you want. I'm just helping you out with guiding you along a path here.
So if you do have clients who have those cash flow needs, perhaps unexpected, during those times of turbulence, how do you deal with those?
Again, it all comes from the original setup in a lot of cases, right? So when clients are nervous about the markets, they're nervous of volatility, and they're fearful about maybe running out of money, if you've developed that relationship with them, you're going to know who that personality is. You're going to know who the little squirrel is who's stacked away all that cash in their bank account. You're also going to know who that spendthrift is. If you're asking the questions, you will know those answers. How can you get to know your client if you're not really blunt with them? Do you need cash? What's the status of your debt load right now? We need to be on top of those questions, because it's not always about simply what the performance of the portfolio is.
So what questions do you ask a client, or even yourself, when you're trying to find solutions for these sudden and sometimes expected and sometimes unexpected cash flow needs?
So again, we're back to having those real conversations with clients and digging out that information that we need. We need to be creative, I think, sometimes with where we're maybe sourcing cash flow solutions for people. Maybe they have a maturing GIC at the institution. Maybe there's extra cash inside their bank account. We need to ask ourselves what else that they have working for them. Should there be tweaks that are needed to be made inside the portfolio itself? Have we ever entertained the idea of introducing an annuity to a client so that those fixed income expenses are being covered on a monthly basis? Do we even know if our client has started their CPP payments? Sometimes clients spend more in retirement than they really need to. We've all experienced that particular individual. So maybe it's time that we ask them to start peeling back a little bit on some of those lifestyle expenses so that we're not draining their sources of income too rapidly, especially when the markets are taking a bit of a beating and values are down inside portfolios.
As challenging as it is to sometimes keep clients in the market, it can be even more challenging to keep them invested during turbulent times. How do you deal with this in your practice?
My conversations with clients of late have been about being more defensive, harvesting in that greed and hunkering down and just getting prepared. But when the noise is happening, this is when a completely different skill set for the financial advisor needs to come out. Back in 2012, I wanted to go back into the American markets with client portfolios. If you can remember, Barack Obama was just reelected, signed in for a second term. Quantitative easing was on everybody's lips. The United States was going bankrupt. All of the media was so negative. And there's me going, let's go back into the United States. And I think that's when our skill starts to really shine for the client, because you need to basically not be a lemming. You need to go in the opposite direction of where everybody is heading. So if people are chasing returns in a hot market, you need to be hunkering down and maybe trimming things a little bit. And then when all the noise is happening and the fear is driving the investor market, the retail public, that's when we need to go back in and tell clients, well, no, this is the time. This is the buy low moment that you talk about that nobody ever does.
So how has your approach assisted with client retention?
So I keep a box of tissues on my desk. And it's because you never know when somebody is going to burst into tears. And no, this has nothing to do with portfolio evaluations. It's because we wear so many hats. We are part financial coach, we are part therapist, I feel like a marriage counselor sometimes. We wear so many hats in this industry. And that demonstrates how deep that relationship is with that client. I really do get a lot of spontaneous hugs from my clients.
So what's the one thing that would be most helpful for advisors to be aware of or to do if markets do take a downturn?
I think your time is now. So if you think something is coming, it's looming, you need to start trimming those positions. You need to put in those defensive spots inside the portfolio now and tell your client why you're doing this. They are going to thank you. We've gotten ready for something that might be looming, but we haven't removed them completely from the market. They appreciate that. They want to know you're on top of it. They want to know that you're ready and that you have a plan and you have a strategy. Don't hide, answer the phone, and be on it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your words of wisdom and experience. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Julia.